This incident happened in 2018. I was a 21-year-old female living near Delhi, India, where I stayed in a rented flat with two other friends of mine. The apartment complex was gated, and it had a security guard. I was pursuing my master's at the time, and I was also enrolled in a training program which I used to attend after my classes, so my weekday routine was pretty packed, from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. I would then attend classes at the university from 5:30 until 7 p.m. I would be at the training center. My friend and flatmate, who I'm going to refer to as Nikki, was also attending the program with me. On this particular day in late November, the sunset was definitely early. Also, the sky seemed a little cloudy. Me and Nikki stepped out of the training center and began a 10-minute walk towards the bus stop. We were running a little late that day due to an extra class. While walking to the bus stop, we had to walk through a small park, and it was not only a shorter route, but we could also avoid the traffic. We stood there for a few minutes, awaiting the bus, and by the time the bus arrived, it was past 8. It was a 20-minute ride to our stop on the highway. To reach our apartment from the stop, we took a path with trees and overgrown bushes that connected the highway to a surface road, which had an intersection. We needed to walk on this interesting road, and then turn on our right to walk ahead until we reached the entry gate. The walk took us around 15 minutes. This was the shortest route. There weren't any houses on this particular road, just a school building with huge walls and a large compound. At night, the roads were usually deserted. We got off at our stop and walked past the bushes. We entered the intersection when suddenly it got dark, and it seemed like there was a blackout. We walked ahead, relying on the moonlight to guide us. We were busy chatting about our class project that we had to submit in a few days. That's when we heard a humming sound from behind us. We turned around to see the figure of a man walking a little farther away from us. We couldn't make out much because it was dark. He was humming a song, and he had a stick in one hand. He was swinging it back and forth. His walk did seem a little weird. It was like he was swaying his body. We weren't spooked, so we just laughed it off and walked ahead. A minute later, we realized the humming had turned into singing. He was singing at the top of his lungs and rhythmically tapping the stick on the ground. We turned around to find out that he had managed to walk closer to us. This still didn't send alarm bells ringing, but we did decide to increase our pace a little. That's when he started babbling loudly. He raised the stick over his shoulder and started matching our pace. It freaked us out. We held each other's hands and began jogging. We made the right turn into our street, and we were hoping he would leave us alone, but when we looked over our shoulders, we saw that he was close behind us. Luckily, the power had been restored, but it didn't stop the man from following us. Jogging on this road, with not a single soul in sight, our last resort was to scream at the top of our lungs if we couldn't make it into the gate. Just then, I saw a dog running towards us. His tail was wagging. It was a street dog, and I remembered feeding him cookies once or twice. As soon as the dog got near us, he noticed the man and started barking at him. We turned back to have a look, and we saw the guy was trying to chase the dog away by swinging the stick. But I guess he was terrified of this barking dog who was blocking his way, so he couldn't come near me. That's also when we were able to get a good look at the guy. He was standing under a streetlight. He wore a white shabby shirt and baggy black pants with an overgrown beard and messy uncombed hair. I just hope the guy didn't hurt this poor dog with the stick. We sprinted and managed to reach the front gate of our apartment. We were both gasping for air as we turned to look in the direction that we came running from. We saw that guy had left his stick on the ground and was running back in the direction we came from. The dog was still barking at him and chased him away for a short distance. Thanks to that dog, we managed to get away from this crazy guy. We have no clue why he was chasing us with that stick. He didn't seem like a homeless guy. Maybe he was drunk or not very mentally stable. Anyway, this was a terrifying thing, but what terrifies me the most is something Nikki said. She said that she was sure that she'd seen the guy on a bench in the park staring at us as we passed him. That same park we walked through to catch our bus. She didn't take him seriously at the time, because it's not that unusual to see random people just staring at you. I believe her, because she's really good at remembering faces, and she was pretty sure it was the same man. That would mean that he was stalking us, but why us, and what were his intentions? We weren't even sure if he boarded the same bus. We never saw him again, which was a relief. This incident did teach us to be more careful of our surroundings. Better safe than sorry. When I was about 12, I moved with my mom and big brother to a house that was about 20 miles away from the nearest town. Seeing that my mom didn't have a car at the time, and my brother wasn't old enough to drive, I would have to take a taxi to school every day. But when my mom went looking for taxis to take me to school, they all came up with excuses, like that it was too far, or that they were too busy. But finally, after hours of looking online, she found a guy who was willing to take me to school every day at an extremely low price. A couple months had passed, and I was getting ready for bed, excited about math, which I just had my first lesson in. I hopped into bed. My bed was facing the window. I liked it like that because it helped me sleep for some reason. It was a normal morning. I got up and brushed my teeth, had a shower, and then played on my phone for a couple minutes. I waited for my taxi to pull up. When it did, it was a large man, standing about 6'7" at my door. I'm pretty sure that I nearly fainted in horror when I heard his banging, just to find out that it was my taxi driver. He did the same when I arrived home as well, which was strange for him, because he was a very quiet man. He would never say hi or bye, and I was fine with that because I'm pretty shy myself. I was about to slam the door behind me, just to make sure it shut properly, when I saw this taxi driver's foot kick the door back open. I heard his deep voice say, "Is your mother in?" I told him that she was, and then I shouted for her. She was in the next room with my brother. I was sitting in my bedroom while they spoke, so all I could hear was my mother's trembling voice. It's like she was nearly screaming in fear. We moved out a week later. My mother never told me why or what they spoke about until a few days ago. I asked about it, and she told me that the taxi driver had arrived 10 minutes early, and he claimed to have seen a small man, about 5'9". The man had a knife clearly down his sleeve, and a camera held firmly in his hand. Next to it was a plastic bag, swinging off a strap on his chest. The taxi driver did try to catch him, but ended up grabbing the bag and ripping it off the man's chest. He said it was full of pictures of me and my mom. They never found the guy, but gladly, I had to get my coat when the taxi driver pulled up. Otherwise, I would have witnessed all of this, and probably been scarred for life. I grew up in a small town that was about 15 minutes outside of Paris. Yes, this story takes place in France. For personal reasons, I'm not going to name the town, but in short, let's just say that it's full of a bunch of elderly people who love to give blood donations. I was around 13 or 14 years old. I'm female, and I'd recently dropped out of normal school due to severe bullying. I began doing online school, which was much easier, because there were less people picking fights with me. My older sister would leave early in the morning to go to school, while my dad would leave at the same time for work. My mom would stay home with me for a few hours in the morning, before going out and doing some work as well. That would leave me home alone all day, until my sister, dad, and mom came back. I didn't really mind being on my own that much. My parents, however, weren't too happy with me being on my own. At the time, I didn't pay much attention to their worries or warnings about the growing dangers in our town, and in France in general. When I look back on this now, I realize how weird and slightly creepy this was. I'm just going to tell you what was going on in my town, so that you can understand some context. Since there were many elderly people, it was pretty easy to break in and rob them. I don't want to sound offensive, but there were these old fat men from Romania. They would come into different towns, including mine, and recruit teenagers to rob houses. In return, they would give them money, drugs, and so on. Usually the teenagers would run up and down different streets and ring people's doorbells. Actually, I should say fence bells. In France, everyone has a fence going around their house, and we don't have guns like in America. Unless you're a hunter and work at a market or something, then there's a lot of restrictions. The teens would come up to people's houses, ring their doorbell, and wait a few minutes. They'd watch the house for a while and then run off. They usually did this to see who would respond. It was a way of checking to see who was home, or if someone was even home at all. When this happens, it's best to call the police. The teens would usually try to outrun the cop cars. Sometimes, there were fake entrepreneurs who would ring people's doorbells and try to sell them something. They really just wanted you to open the gate so they could get in and rob you. Recently, before this incident, an old lady was beaten and robbed because she opened her gate for 2 police officers. They said they wanted to ask her some questions about a case, but they weren't real police officers. Now that you know about that, my story will make much more sense. The teens running up to people's gates was a daily thing, so we were all used to it. I'm quite a curious person, so when the doorbell rang, I peeped my head out the curtains to see who it was. I have a really good memory, so I still remember what this guy looked like. He had an American-style high school sports team jacket. His hair was slightly spiky, with what looked like hair gel, and he wore dark blue skinny jeans with white sneakers. I didn't think he saw me, since I just stuck my head through the curtains for a few seconds. My parents told me to call the police when this happened, but I didn't feel threatened. Eventually, he left, and I went on with my work. Over the next couple weeks, I'd see him come up and ring the doorbell. He would wait, scan the house, and then leave. This started to happen more and more frequently, and I still never called the police on him. I guess I figured that if something were to happen, I'd use my taekwondo on him and his buddies, but I highly doubted that that would happen. On some days, he would come early in the morning and watch my father and older sister leave the house. He just stood there watching them. I thought this was weird, but I still wasn't too alarmed. One day, however, he was standing outside our house. He was across the street just watching us for hours on end until my mom came home. Another day, I saw him in his usual spot across the street just staring at us again. He must have been there for 2 hours until a black car with tinted windows pulled up. He got into the car and sat there for a few minutes before driving away slowly. I thought that was odd, but I never mentioned it to my parents. Well done, younger me. A few days later, I was doing my schoolwork when my mom told me she was going out to buy something. I just nodded at her and continued my work. The following part will be from what my mom told me. My mom had pulled the car into the garage and was about to leave the house when she made eye contact with the teen. He made some kind of a creepy grin at her. My mom felt something was off. She pulled back into the garage and closed the gate. She came upstairs and told me to come with her because she didn't like the way the guy was standing in front of our house. I didn't want to get up and go anywhere, but my mom forced me to come with her. When we pulled out of the garage and we were in the street, my mom closed the gate. I turned my head and made contact with the guy. He looked really angry about something. As we drove away, I turned my head back to look at him again and saw he was turned towards us. He watched me and my mom drive away. He just stood there looking really angry until we were out of sight. Once we were gone, my mom told me how creepy he looked, and she called the police to come to the house. Nothing ever came of this, and our house was never robbed. Now that I come to think of the memory, it's much creepier than I originally thought it was. If he was just checking on the house as a possible place to rob, then why did he look so angry when he saw me in the back seat of my mom's car? I live in upstate New York, and this happened in the early 90s. I'm guessing 91 or 92. I was around 10 years old. Me and my mom were at my local shopping mall at the Radio Shack. Radio Shack was one of my favorite stores, right behind KB Stores, which was on the other side of the mall. We had already been to KB, and I even remember what we bought there, a Junior Magician's kit. I was near the front of Radio Shack, looking at the musical keyboards when I noticed a man sitting on a bench outside the store, watching me. He appeared to be in his late 50s, and he was wearing a plaid shirt and jeans. I tried to ignore him, but I got a really creepy vibe. I pretended not to notice, because it seemed like he was watching me intensely. There was another kid, a little younger than me, with the keyboards as well. He didn't seem to notice the guy. Eventually, the kid walked away, and I started to play a couple random notes on the keyboards nervously. Suddenly, the guy said to me,
"Hey, come here."
I knew something was wrong. While trying to act as casual as possible, I walked up to my mom and said, "Let's get out of here." I didn't tell her exactly why, because I didn't want to freak her out. I don't know why I didn't just tell her about the potential danger outside the store. I guess I just didn't want the guy to think I was scared at all. I was afraid he might just walk up and grab me, or hurt my mom. We exited the store, walking right past the guy. I had my mom's hand, and I was practically dragging her out of the store. We started walking to the exit, and I kept looking back. We were about halfway there, and I saw the guy get up. He was following us. He was walking pretty slow, not really in a hurry after us. He seemed to be just taking a stroll, but he was definitely coming. I pulled my mom a little harder, as if to tell her to hurry up. She asked me why I was in such a hurry. I didn't say anything just yet. We got to the door and hurried towards the car. We finally got to the car, and I was keeping an eye on the door, hoping he wouldn't come out. Then I told my mom what happened. I said that some guy came up to me and told me to come to him. Then I told her that we had to get out of here fast, before he sees which car we got into. We got going, and I was constantly looking back, making sure we weren't being followed. I was pretty much freaked out for the rest of the day, thinking every car that drove by my house was that creepy guy, even though I'm pretty sure he never saw which way we went. I couldn't even really enjoy my magic trick kit that I'd just gotten. I never saw him again though, thank goodness.